Yo, y'all got some nerves not telling me that Turtle Bro had updated or had uploaded his Pokemon Black and White 2 video, which is pretty much a sequel. Well, it is a sequel to his Black and White 1 video of how these games were made. I am going to be reacting to both videos. I'm going to put timestamps in the description section below. I'm going to need y'all to do me a humongous favor though. 3 things, right? Make sure, 1, you leave a like on this video. Any feedback, any conversations that start or whatever, put them in the comment section. 2, you go in the description and you click both of these videos links. You click both of these videos, both of them, and you leave a like on these videos. Support the original content. Support your favorite content creators, of course. Especially if you enjoyed the video. Come on, what are you doing? You should have already been you should have clicked the like button the moment you clicked the video. You know what I'm saying? That should have been in your head already. You know what I'm saying? And last but not least, which is I guess 4th out of the 3 that I said, it's up to you actually. Consider signing up over on the website in the description section below at secondofmind.com, where you can support the boy for the list $2 a month. And real talk, let's just get up into it right now. We're gonna start off with Black and White 1 first. This is like a good 20-something minutes, and then this is gonna be 20-something minutes. So it's gonna be a very, very long video, bruh. Oh my God, bless me. You ready for this, bro? We're gonna take a break and like in the middle of it all. Let's go.
So, Diamond and Pearl launched on September 28,
yes, sir.
2006. And while Game Freak still had to roll out Platinum for Gen 2 remakes and juggle localization dates, they had almost 4 years of prep time for Generation 5, which was a lot for the DS era, especially considering recent generations now have less development time despite being way more technically demanding. And if you saw the Diamond and Pearl deep dive, you'll know Game Freak poured everything into Gen 4 to try and make the ultimate Pokemon experience at the time. Thus, Gen 5 became the grounds for a philosophical reboot of a series. First overseas-based region, strictly new Pokemon, a big push towards storytelling, and overall just a fresh experience. It was a bold time for Pokemon.
Listen, man, I really don't like how the internet did Black and White 2, or Black and White in general. I think that the anime being bad played a humongous part as to why people did not like Black and White 1 and Black and White 2. I think that Black and White 1 and Black and White 2 as video games are way better than any other iteration. Because unfortunately, right, if you remember back then, we had the Black and White games. We had the worst mystery dungeon that everybody and their mom hates. I don't like Mystery Dungeon, but I know that people hate Gates to Infinity. We had the Poke Park games that were like kind of mixed. We had the Pokemon Conquest. We had what else we had? We had so many spin-off titles that just weren't good. This was like around a dark time for Pokemon content that wasn't the main series games. But I think that like outside of Pokemon Conquest and Pokemon Black and White 2, everything else was kind of just garbage. But those 3 games were like the better versions of that generation. And it sucks too, because I think a lot of people are lying about their like design like opinions for the decks of Generation 5, because a lot of your favorite Pokemon come from Generation 5. Especially if you play competitive, like a lot of people's early X and Y, Sun and Moon teams had a whole bunch of Generation 5 Pokemon on them if it weren't new Pokemon anyway. So it's like, what are you talking about? Well, it sucks too because weather got nerfed. It doesn't matter. Listen, these games have aged better than a lot of Pokemon fans would like to admit. And I think that Black and White and Black and White 2 are probably the best Pokemon games. Maybe like the second. Like if you had like a number 1, it'd be your favorite. I think Generation 5 would be like either your second or your third. Some people might have Sun and Moon. I'm not really sure, but Generation 5 should be in your top 3 or 4 for sure. My fault.
And thanks to the Terra leak, we now have access to hundreds, if not thousands of beta builds from this really strange experimental era. And now I've created a full timeline for it. Huge shout out to The Bomb I couldn't have made this video without you, and MD Travis, the legend who compiled a ton of the builds that I'll be talking about. Before we dive in, if you enjoy videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to keep up with all of my latest uploads.
Let's go. 2006. Oh
So
my
according
goodness.
to the compiler himself, MD Travis, the Black and White repo dates back to late 2006. And sure, while Gen 5 wasn't Game Freak's main focus at the time, the build surfaced as far back as here. Seeing as though this was just weeks after Diamond and Pearl had released, most of the team were probably busy prepping for Platinum and the Gen 2 remakes, while a very small group were assigned to the Gen 5 project, building out tech demos for the next year and a half. In the middle of this tech demo phase, we have May 6, 2007. This is called the Dungeon Tech Demo. It's basically just a character running around a 3D maze. Most notably, the player character is a 3D model of Mei. Now it's unclear if this specific demo was made in-house by Game Freak, or if it was sourced from another engine, but the presence of Mei as a playable model strongly suggests they were experimenting with breaking out of 2D sprites. Over 6 years before X and Y released. Honestly, the model itself deserves a spotlight. I think it looks great, and it's the closest we have to
It don't look
translating
bad.
the classic Pokemon sprites and proportions into 3D.
It don't
Even
look
just
bad at
watching
all.
it run around, you can see the vision.
This is like Mega Man
Potential is
Legends.
there. Fast forward a week, and now Mei has a hammer and a bow. You can swap
Okay,
between
Amy
them too.
Rose, what's going
I assume
on?
this was for testing object handling or equipment mechanics, maybe as a precursor to item-based overworld puzzles. Not sure how it would have translated to Pokemon gameplay though. The next day, the build featured a tech demo for a cancelled remake of Yoshi no Tamago, a puzzle game from the Super Nintendo. This remake never released. There's no record of its development, and this early black and white build is the only trace of its existence. For the rest of 2007,
That's not weird.
it was mostly just tech demo tinkering. As I mentioned, the main dev team was locked into Platinum and the Gen 2 remakes. But we do know that Black and White were officially pitched on April 13th, 2007. If you haven't watched my Black and White deep dive yet, I highly recommend checking it out after this. But a quick recap, the pitch doc outlined how Gen 5 were already planning to base the region on New York. Many of the game's pitched features were also very ambitious. Skipping ahead to April 1st, 2008, the tinkering phase is officially over, and it's a special day, because it marks the official start of program development for Pokemon Black and White, just under a year after the pitch. This build features a more evolved version of the Dungeon Tech demo. Mei has been replaced with a completely different model. The character has realistic proportions, tall frame, longer limbs. It honestly feels less like Pokemon and more like a random 3DS prototype. Except this is still running on the Nintendo DS. Like you could boot this on your DS Lite. While I'm conflicted on this topic, and I doubt Game Freak ever truly planned to go this direction for Gen 5, the demo shows that they were pushing the limits, even just as an internal benchmark. The same build included a 3-dimensional Tetris puzzle demo. Then, just 2 days later, the dungeon demo had evolved even
This does
further.
not look
The character
nothing like
model is way more
Pokemon.
detailed, and you can
Like
now
a
switch between
RuneScape.
multiple outfits. The screen has visible toggles and options that affect gameplay, and most bizarrely, roaming Charizard models start appearing. Game Freak was actively pushing the DS hardware. Black and White didn't even have any 3D models of Pokemon, besides in the opening and the legendary cutscenes. You see this character jumping around too, and quickly it feels like Pokemon was heading in a completely different direction. A day later it escalates. Now there's an entire squad of giant Charizards surrounding the player. It's a pretty surreal experience, honestly. But again, this is just benchmark testing the engine. Then we get to April 13th.
Oh my
The demo
god.
now features a wide, flat test map, with tons of Pokemon NPCs running around, and those giant Charizards are still here. What's interesting is that the player character is invisible, and even more notably, the NPCs aren't gridlocked anymore. I think it's worth highlighting the fact that at this point, it's clear that Game Freak wasn't just building on top of a Gen 4 engine. You'd assume they just took the Gen 4 framework and built on top of it. But no, this is all Generation 5 was in April 2008, a completely new foundation, where the focus was on reinventing the engine and redefining what a Pokemon game could be. Moving along a few months, we get to the August 8th build, one of the most legendary builds
Oh
in the
my
entire development timeline.
goodness.
This is the open world tech demo I've talked about before. A hugely ambitious, sandbox-style Pokemon build. The camera is fully rotatable, and there's no grid system at all. It's the most open we've ever seen 2D Pokemon. NPCs scattered across the map. The whole concept shows just how much potential.
Yo, they were
Pokemon
cooking
has
up
in
a
this
different
genre.
bag with
was their
this. Oh
what if
my
moment.
god.
And here's the full map of the scenario.
What if?
Also worth noting, the Hot Gold protagonist sprite appears here,
You know?
even though that game wouldn't release for another year. Fast forward to November 28, and this build features multiple testing scenarios. And now there's clearly more Hot Gold influence. As you can see, the open concept was placed inside Violet City, using assets from Hot Gold and Soul Silver. Honestly speaking, this is probably the cleanest, most realistic version of the 2D open world idea, and it feels like the final form of that original Dungeon Tech demo. I would love to play a Pokemon game in this style.
Nah, not this one. Not this one, not this one, not this one.
Another scenario puts the player in Celestic Town, but the gameplay was touchscreen based and designed only for the bottom
Yo, this looks like Pokemon. Like, what the fuck?
screen, which might sound odd, but many early DS games did often prioritize the touchscreen for primary gameplay.
That
It was
Charizard
even
is
a concept
horrible.
explored for Diamond and Pearl. What's interesting here is that double tapping the screen actually makes the character jump, a feature we've never seen in mainline
that's
Pokemon
beautiful.
games, and it's a pretty big
Yo.
deal because adding a jump mechanic
hold on.
drastically changes
Yo, I know we got to jump for the Scarlet and Violet, like the Koraidon riding on Mons thing. Let the characters jump, Game Freak. Let the characters jump. I think it's time we start like actually doing things as a player, you know?
the gameplay framework of Pokemon, especially tied with those early open world concepts.
This is
It could have
cool.
completely changed how Pokemon played. The next scenario was the earliest draft of Sky Arrow Bridge, which is in fact the earliest piece of anything Unova created in-game. And the last scenario was a prototype Gen 5 battle scene, which was surprisingly close to the final version, considering how early on this was. Also, the camera could move around, which might seem like a testing feature, but then the Pokemon sprites would react depending on where the camera was. There was also a graphic supposed
Okay, that
to
would have been
represent
really
training
good.
info. Overall, a nice presentation of a battle. And finally, the battle features two completely unused Pokemon designs. Not even placeholder designs. These feel like genuine thought out designs that were cut at some point. Then we move into December 2008, where we see the earliest work on the actual Unova map. This right here is a very early version of Route 1. And one thing that immediately stands out is the scale. It's surprisingly huge, almost reminiscent of Johto's Route 30, though the layout is completely different. Heading into Accumula Town, you can see two separate paths leading in the same direction, again hinting at just how expansive
But look
Route
how
1
early-
originally was.
Look how early that drop is. Like you see, like this is in 2008. This design, or I guess this town design, was already like even like a thought, right? Because the moment you get into that town, is that big drop that goes to nowhere, and it's like it's right here in like 2008, bro.
And here's what
That's
Accumula
dope.
Town looked like.
That's
right
cool
away
as
there's some
hell.
graffiti in the lower
See?
part of a map. The signpost to the right was missing, instead some red trees in its place. The Pokemon Center was absent, just Pikachu graffiti where it would eventually be. One especially interesting detail is the southwest exit, which originally led to another area with tall grass. In the final game, this whole section is completely closed off. Also, no tunnel transition into Route 2, just a seamless overworld connection. Route 2 itself had a completely different structure. I noticed just how much larger and more ambitious early Unova routes
Yeah,
felt,
these routes
especially
are
compared to the final game.
humongous, bro.
Route 2 hadn't been fully developed yet. The northern part was utilized as a testing area. Notably, it includes the first Gen 5 Pokemon Center appearance. The interior was also different. You can also visibly see the lower level, a nice detail that kind of carries over to the final version. Jumping into January 2009, one scenario in the build appears to test 3D camera movement in an unidentified location. Considering how this feature remains in the final game's files, it really seems like free camera control was still being considered very late into production, something we wouldn't see in a mainline game until Sword and Shield. Also a small detail, the trees were updated from the last build. By February 1st, we start to see some major overall
you remember-
changes. We begin
Do you
with
remember when everybody and their mom was complaining over the Sword and Shield trees? I'm gonna be honest with you. As much as I hate Sword and Shield, that is not one of the reasons why I hate those games. But like, it adds to a different like conversation entirely. Cause it's like, yeah, you know, we work so hard on like, you know, our Pokemon animations. You mean the G Maxes while you reuse the 3DS skeletons. Interesting. Got it. Really hard. Brand new animations, guys. Double kick doesn't do any damage. It's like things like that where it's just like y'all just lie. Like Game Freak lies so badly, bro. But then you see things like this where it's like these concepts weren't just like fan fiction, fan theories. Like these were actually like drawn out ideas. When was it like that? Who remembers long time ago when people talked about the cameras, right? You could literally move cameras in these builds in 2009 of all times, dude. It's so big. It's so grand, you know? I like it a lot.
It's again in Accumula Town, now featuring a tunnel leading south, which wasn't in the final game, more NPCs wandering around, and the Pokemon Center is finally in its proper place. The interior remains the same as before. Heading west into Route 2, the layout stays largely consistent with a previous version, but now features updated graphics. Notably, the art style here is super unique, almost like a blend of Generation 4 and 5's aesthetics. Here's some gameplay of the route itself. Interestingly, the trainer card UI is literally just a placeholder from Beta Heart Gold. The battle
Okay, but I like that portrait. That was beautiful.
Really expressive animation for the opposing Pokemon, and the move screen is extremely bare. Again, not built on top of Gen 4, and clearly built from scratch. There's even an option to play around with a fixed camera angle. And finally, this build also includes a winter map, showing how they were already experimenting with seasonal environments. Then on the February 5th build, we get a brief glimpse of the earliest version of Castelia City. Just a single snapshot, but still significant. Moving along further to May 27, development had clearly ramped up. This build introduces a fully designed and textured New Vema Town, along with a first proper Generation 5 styled sprites. Despite New Vema looking close to the final version, the interiors were noticeably smaller, which made me realize how spacious Gen 5 interiors ended up being. I feel like the upper floor in the player's house was even more compact than older games. We also get a look at the beta version of a dialogue text box. The professor's lab had some small visual differences, but the overall layout remained mostly unchanged. This random NPC seems to be standing in as a placeholder for the professor. Heading back into Route 1, this version feels slightly different, and I actually think it's even larger, especially based on this area near the north. We also see an update to the trainer animation,
Yo, look at
now
Woobat!
properly aligned with Gen 5 style. Returning to Accumula Town, the layout has been cleaned up quite a bit. The stairs now match their position in the final game, but overall, the town still feels smaller than its final iteration. Route 2 also got an update, but it cuts off earlier than you'd expect. Just a couple days later, May 31st had this musical cutscene where various Pokemon are shown dancing, clearly a prototype of Pokemon musicals. This build also gives us our first glimpse at the bottom screen UI. It's still early, but the basic structure is starting to take shape. And here's a look at some general gameplay. The Pokemon Center interior had also been fully designed by this point.
This is
While
good.
very close to the final look. It was actually much smaller in this build. The final version ended up extending the space significantly. Also, the color scheme was quite different. Route 2's graphics got another update, now looking much closer to the final version in terms of tiles and visuals, but the layout was still completely different. Striaton City made its first appearance here as well, but at this point, it was filled with placeholder Pokemon Center buildings.
This is horrible.
And here's how the area towards the west looked.
And this is the daycare center, right?
By June 4th, the focus had clearly shifted. At this stage, Game Freak had a solid gameplay foundation for the early towns and routes, so the attention turned towards visual polish, refining the art style, and finalizing how Generation 5 would look. Notably, this build also includes the first appearance of an unused Pokemon design, and the earliest rendition of a Dream Yard music.
Okay. Hey.
Strangely, when you return to Striaton City, the town appears fully textured. By August 7th, Game Freak had made some notable improvements to the overall presentation, with various visual upgrades starting to take shape. One detail I personally love is how the doors now have a glowing effect. The interiors were also updated, now feeling much more spacious and closer to the layouts we see in the final game. Though the player's house still had a few oddities. I believe this scene was meant to represent the choose your starter moment, and here it looks like we're seeing the placeholders for Bianca and Sharon. And the build also featured our earliest look at the Unova region map. By this point, Game Freak had built out a significant portion of Unova. In fact, this is the first build I could find where the main area of Castalia City is fully textured. I really like how this earlier Castalia Street looks. The Sky Arrow Bridge level was basically complete at this point too, along with all of the cinematic camera angles from the final version. Here's just some miscellaneous gameplay footage from around Unova. It's clear that by now, a lot had been completed. I also noticed more variety in the wild Pokemon encounters.
Level 5 Sigilyph would have been crazy. That would have been nuts.
And Game Freak had started populating the buildings with specific hand-picked NPCs.
Nah, this is dope as hell, dude.
Soul Silver was wrapping up around this time, and you can really
they
feel
had
the
so
momentum
much
shift.
ready,
By mid-2009,
dude.
Black and White became a top priority, and more developers were clearly being assigned to the project. And the difference in pace and polish is noticeable. During this development ramp-up, we get the August 17th build. If you've seen
Yo, they had so much ready, dude. That's so crazy to see. And the very moment they released Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it's like, yeah, let's turn it up. And then like the whole build just changes and it just looks way more polished. It starts looking like those very old, like fake, like leak rumor things, screenshots that used to be back in the day. Y'all probably was never around for that, dude. But oh my God, like it starts looking so like archaic for that time. Like I remember being like on YouTube back then, and YouTube back then was so weird because it was mostly like Maryland and Shofu and a whole bunch of Pokemosh Pit YouTubers back then just uploading like regular Wi-Fi battles at the time. And Wi-Fi battles back then were so crazy. And you would see like, you know, oh, Pokemon Generation 5 leaks or whatever, and those videos originally were like just screenshot beta old gameplay footage and things that were like in possibly in development and just fake leaks back then, dude. But these look so crazy because it looks almost like that. It's like a whole side of like my childhood is like being shown again. But this looks really good, dude. I like it a lot. This is cool. You might remember that we discussed the scrap design for the Castalia City Pokemon Center, one with dual entrances, and clearly inspired by Nintendo New York. In that video, we speculated whether or not the interior was different too, and the answer is yes. It featured a completely unique layout, exclusive to this version of a Pokemon Center. The design of course includes the dual entrance, but also the healing area was shifted to the left, which is very odd. I don't think we've ever seen a Pokemon Center from this angle. The Pokemon remains in its usual spot. We have a PC right in front of the entrance. Honestly, if you take the left entrance, this is the most convenient Pokemon Center layout ever designed. But judging by the placement of the PCs up top and the healing station, I can't help but wonder if the original plan was to have dynamic camera angles that change as you get closer to each entrance. The inner part of Castalia City went through multiple revisions during this time. Also notably, the battle UI was finalized well over a year before release. Aside from a map progress, you can also see that Game Freak began scripting NPC behavior, making them interactable, giving them movement patterns, and overall bringing the world of Unova to life. By October 13th, Game Freak had begun implementing the story events directly into the game. The game was actually playable up to a decent point in the early story, even though it still used placeholder sprites and graphics to represent characters and elements that hadn't been So wait a minute. So the story was like the version of the game that's being played right now is a version that came out like a year and a half before. Was the story the last bits before cleanup, before release? Like, that's crazy, no? Yet. I like the camera control in this build. Dog, if only, that would have been crazy, dude. We get the first build that includes Hilbert's overworld sprite. Hilbert! And here's some of the early designs for the starters. The game was really starting to come together at this point. This was also shortly after Heart Gold and Soul Silver released in Japan, meaning Black and White became Game Freak's main focus, and huge progress was being made every day.
By December 1st, Castelia City was still going through revisions, the dual entrance Pokemon Center was still present in this build, now with an updated and more polished layout. Unfortunately, this was also the last time we ever saw the dual entrance Pokemon Center.
Oh, but it's
The
still
game started
ass.
showing more and more polish throughout December. You can see it's
There
really
goes Hilda.
starting to look like the final game. Gyms were now featuring puzzles, and
Okay.
tons of events were scripted out.
Mom.
Graphics massively improved in the span of mere days. December 15th saw the extended prototype.
Oh, they're
opening
going
cutscene,
crazy. You see how
along with a
fast
brief
they're
appearance
going?
Of an unused,
What
really
is
mystical
that?
Pokemon design. There was also a beta title
Was-
screen featuring.
But what if that's Victini? Like what? Like bro, what if that's like dead ass? What if that's like Beta Victini, bro? Or this region's Pikachu, like a Molga, like a Molga before it got the wings or whatever. This looks dope as hell, dude.
Unused, rumored mythical Pokemon design. There was also a beta title screen featuring Zekrom perched on Sky Arrow Bridge,
That
which
would've
is a
been
pretty cool
horrifying.
visual. Accumula Town's layout was finalized, and the Team Plasma cutscene was now implemented. Strangely, Lucas and Dawn sprites were still present, and interacting with this one random NPC would trigger a slowed down Dialga cry. Then by Christmas Day, Bianca finally received her overworld sprite. The Unova map UI had also been finalized.
Are they going crazy?
And I believe the Elite
Do you
Four
see
battles
how
were slightly
fast they're
different compared
moving,
to
bro?
the
Look at
final
these
version.
dates.
Rolling into January 4th, 2010, Game Freak had compiled all of the beta Unovan Pokemon sprites. Many of them had very different designs from the final versions, and there's even a few unused sprites that never made it into the game. Early 2010
A lot
marked
of
the
unused
final
sprites.
stretch of development for Black and White. By
Here
this
we
point,
go.
most of the game's core content had been completed. It's likely that the team aimed to wrap up development by mid-2010 to shift focus towards bug testing, optimization, and localization. By the end of April, the game was essentially complete. Surprisingly, the only major
Dog,
component
they
still
went
missing from this
crazy.
build was the fully animated battle sprites for every Pokemon, which means one of Generation 5's most iconic features, the animated sprites,
Yo, in a short amount of time, they went absolutely crazy, y'all. Bro, have you been paying attention to like the dates in this entire thing? This is insanity, bro.
one of the very last things fully added, a detail that's now widely celebrated, and often cited as a key reason why many fans consider Black and White the peak of 2D Pokemon. It just goes to show that even in the latest stages of game development, even though you've created an amazing game, you can still add something that reshapes the legacy of the game forever. And with that, we've officially covered the full development timeline of Pokemon Black and White. If you enjoyed this deep dive,
That
don't
was
forget to
it?
like
No.
the video, subscribe.
What? Nah, dog. Yo. I'm surprised he didn't go over the like scrap designs for the Pokemon in this game, but I think that's probably in his the video that he mentioned before, right? The Black and White scrapped content video, which is 14 minutes long, dude. My goodness, dude. Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch that either on my own time or at another point, but this is crazy because I'm just like, like that development must have been crazy, dude. Okay, take a break, come back, and then we're gonna finish this off on a high note. Okay, here's how Black and White. I gotta subscribe to bro. Let me just go ahead and subscribe to him right now while I'm here. Let's do that right now. Let's
Black 2
go.
and White 2 was a really unique situation for Pokemon.
Talk to
the
me.
first and only direct numbered sequels in the series. We're talking completely new events, brand new features, a new story mode, and an expanded
What a
region,
time.
all developed in the middle of Game Freak's transition to Generation 6, which was arguably the most dramatic leap in the series' history. So how did they pull this off? Well, that's what we're looking at today. First off, huge shout out to MD Travis. He's the guy who's compiled almost every prototype build from
The GOAT,
Generations
real
5 through
talk.
6, and without his additional insight, this video wouldn't have been possible. And if you guys enjoy these type of stories, don't forget to show your support by subscribing to the channel. With that being said, let's get into it. Our story actually begins during the development of the original Black and White. Even though program development for BW2 didn't officially kick off until after the release of BW1, some ideas that eventually ended up in the sequels seem to have been tested much earlier. The earliest case of this dates back to July 2009 with the Castelia sewers. For those who don't know,
Ah.
Castelia Sewers was an area exclusive to BW2, but this was initially planned for BW1. You can actually see an early entrance near the docks that would have led into the sewers. Keep in mind, the location of the entrance is different from where it ended up in the sequels. At this stage, the sewer interior was just a simple house template, which was common for Gen 5 development. Then in September and December 2009, we even saw slight tweaks to the sewer entrance design, before it was ultimately removed at the end of December. Strangely though, the interior data stuck around, and in early 2010, it was even modeled into a placeholder sewer layout, with indicators for 3 different floors. It's unclear whether the team planned to rework the entrance back in and actually include it in BW1, or if the developer just didn't get the memo that it was cut. Either way, on March 27, the sewer interior was ultimately removed from BW1. Another example of sequel concepts sneaking into the original comes from May 14, 2010. Up until this point, Black and White featured a beta Kyurem sprite, one you may have seen before. The design looked radically different to the final version. But on May 14, Kyurem received its final design and was actually given 2 different placeholder forms. Remember, this is still during BW1 development, and already we're looking at evidence of multiple Kyurem forms. This also happens to be the same day that the Reshiram and Zekrom sprites were finalized, losing their red and blue color tones. And just a week later on May 25th, both Kyurem forms were removed in favor of a single final design, and that's also when it got its animation. It's fair to assume that Game Freak originally considered introducing 2 Kyurem forms in BW1, but sometime during that week, they decided it'd be better to save them for the sequels. As far as we know, those are the only clear examples of BW2 concepts being tested in BW1. Development for the original Black and White wrapped up with its release on September 18, 2010, and just a couple weeks later on October 1st, Swan officially branched off from the original Black and White project, the same day that X and Y began development. Important to note that actual development for BW2 began on October 5th, likely because they spent the first days of October focused on setting up X and Y. But essentially this means both X and Y and BW2 began development at the same time and were being developed at the exact same time. To weave some history together, in those early weeks of October, it seems like X and Y was more of a priority. After all, it was Game Freak's first 3D Pokemon game. Despite this, BW2 still saw some progress. On October 28th, a static 3D Kyurem model was added to the title screen.
This Pokemon Gray. This is Pokemon Gray.
Though it still carried Black One branding at the time, this was the first addition to BW2. Then just a few days later, the BW2 logo was officially added to the title screen, and the Kyurem model was given a small animation. A small step, but huge in the grand scheme of the project. Throughout November, the game was still just Black and White with a new label slapped on it. The first few months was spent mostly on improving the engine and backend systems, while X and Y early development remained a strong priority for Game Freak. But on November 15, BW2 finally received its first gameplay feature, the updated title cards. By December 3rd, Black and White 1 events were still present in the game, but at the same time, this would also be the last time we'd see BW1 intact inside the BW2 project, because by December 14, everything was wiped. Every NPC, every scripted event, the entire story mode was gone. Castelia City literally became a ghost town. Almost all of Unova was emptied out, with one exception, Nimbasa City. You see, the Nimbasa Gym was the first new location worked on for BW2. At this point, the old design had
just
been
a hallway
scrapped,
anyway? Like
and
who
what we had
really
was the rough foundation
really
of
gives
a
a
new one. Very
Yo.
unfinished. You couldn't even exit the building. Early December also gave us the greatest programmer art of all time, an extremely rough early version of a BW2 gym intro, but by the 14th, that same battle interface was basically complete. Just 2 days later, Nimbasa Gym had received its full design. Textured, scripted, and playable. It wasn't fully complete yet, but this was indeed the first brand new area built for Black 2. The rest of December was spent polishing it further. Lights were added, then synced to the music, and so on. Behind the scenes though, the real focus was on prepping the game's engine for January, setting the stage for the sequels to actually come together. Rolling into the new year, January 6 brought the first signs of updated Wild Encounters. This system would go on to get 31 different revisions over the course of development. This was also when the project started to take big strides. A base for Aspertia City was added to the game, though it looked very different to the final version. In fact, it matched the concept art layout, which you may or may not be familiar with. After all these years, it's amazing to see a version of it in-game. Data for the other maps were also added in. Flockacy Town and Lentimas Town borrowed Lekunoza Town's layout, while Verbank City and Humalau City were using Striaton City. Overall, Game Freak was kicking off 2011 in a big way. By January 11, Castelia Gym's layout had been updated. Here's some cool shots using the 3D camera, as provided by MD Travis. Around this time, we also see some strange unused battle intro effects. One of them almost looks like an alternate shiny animation. Very unusual. By the end of January, BW2's visuals began diverging slightly from BW1. Each season now had slight differences compared to the first game, the field patches were also fixed, and Aspertia City's design had shifted significantly, pivoting away from the concept art design. Verbank City also received its first original layout, which also looked slightly different to the final. As you're seeing right now, the extended dock, which is completely absent in the final game, and just minor differences throughout the city. Flockacy Town also got its first unique design. I noticed some elements carried over into the final, but the layout was completely different. Despite probably using the same amount of surface area, I really prefer how the final version made use of the space instead.
For sure.
It feels way bigger.
For sure. Easily.
Route 19 was also much smaller and much simpler at this stage. Meanwhile, Lentimas Town and Humalau City still hadn't been touched yet. Just over a week later, the final sprite sheet for Nate was added, along with an early version of Rosa's sprite. Nate actually went through 3 revisions in total. The first 2 were just placeholders, including Hilbert with a little swan icon, and then just squares with numbers. By February 9, work on battle backgrounds had begun. Aspertia City now matched its final layout almost perfectly, down to the fine details. On Valentine's Day, seasonal textures were added to the new cities. Interestingly, the lookout area was extended in this build. Maybe they were experimenting with features like sitting on benches.
Yo, they were too busy working instead of getting some puh. They just like me, man. We really locked in, Game Freak, man. Look at X and Y too, dude. That's crazy.
Which would later appear in X and Y. And the final Nate sprite wouldn't actually appear in gameplay until February 17. On February 19, Aspertia City saw more refinement, along with some experiments with a view from the lookout point. And the very next day, the updated Unova map appeared in-game for the first time. It actually featured quite a lot of differences, as I'm highlighting right now. Flockacy Town then received a huge update, nearly its full final design. Verbank City was now surprisingly fully textured and pretty much complete, making it the first city in Black 2 and White 2 to reach that stage.
Let's go.
By March 4th, we saw the first real progress on the Pokemon World Tournament. The interior had been added, but it was still just placeholder tiles, and the NPCs just looped dialogue, though the tournament area itself had been laid out. Around the same time, debug scenarios now started you in Aspertia City, while the normal intro still played out in November Town, just with Nate swapped in. New areas were also finally linked to interiors and the greater Unova map, meaning you could enter every building. This was also when the Unova Pokédex received a small cosmetic up.
What was the Wii sprite? A pot? Or is that a trash can? What the
Shifting from green to its final red color scheme. By March 9, the stairs in Aspertia City were complete, though the lookout area was still extended.
Man,
I do like that
horrible.
from here you could see the opposite side of the gate.
Yeah, that's
quite a
cool
bit
though.
of Route 19.
That
The
is
same
cool
day,
as hell.
We also saw the beginning of reinventing the cut Castelia sewers into BW2. Unfortunately, this would be the last change before development hit a sudden halt 2 days later. On March 11th, the devastating Tohoku
Yeah.
earthquake struck Japan, a nationwide disaster with effects that even reached the Pokemon franchise. Not only did it pause BW2's development for a whole 10 days, it also directly impacted the anime, causing 2 episodes to be permanently scrapped. Game Freak returned to BW2 development on March 21st, but only a single bug fix was made that day, and development would resume as normal the following day. By March 23rd, work on the Castelia Sewers layout picked back up. Compared to BW1, this was a much larger, more complex design. It's kinda surreal to think just how much history is now added to this map, considering this was one of the main focuses around the earthquake time. It's fascinating to think how this design may have been indirectly influenced by the events through a butterfly effect. Then on March 25th, something very strange happened. Every single building in Unova turned into rocks. No kidding, the exteriors were replaced with giant rocks, though you could still interact with them. I tried loading in and out of a map, as that would usually fix any issues, but it was definitely still just rocks, and this was the case in every city. I don't know if it was a glitch, engine tweaking, or even something deep connected to the earthquake here, but I personally haven't seen anything like this on a region-wide scale at any other point in development, and I can't think of any other logical reason for this. Let me know your theories in the comments. Important to note that all the buildings were back to normal by the end of March. Moving into April, development shifted gears. April 6 was an important day for BW2 because this was when the entrance to the Castelia Sewers was officially re-added, in the same place we see in the final game. April 8 would be the final day of setup for BW2 because on the very next day, work began on the story mode, and April 9 came in strong with a massive update to the game. The opening sequence of the game was now implemented, even with details like Bianca's updated sprite.
Can you imagine?
However, the starter picking cutscene was ripped straight from BW1. Rival Hugh was present here too, but he used End's sprite as a placeholder, and his battled sprite was Lucas. Yeah, Lucas was still being used as a placeholder. By April 15, Aspertia City had coded in many of the NPCs and many events. The story carried you all the way to the Herdier event in Floccacy Ranch. Throughout the rest of April, the Pokemon World Tournament interior was updated even further, and we get a glimpse of the mode itself. Here's the trainers from the old tournament. The rival introduction cutscene also saw tweaks, and the lookout view in Aspertia City was finally readjusted to its final design. Then came April 28, another big day in the timeline. This was when Game Freak began work on Pokestar Studios. 2 scenarios were added, both using the same movie-style presentation and mechanics, but one of them featured a completely unique battle background.
Oh, that's
I'm not too familiar with Pokestar, but this is the most detailed Generation 5 backdrop I've ever seen. That same day also marked the first progress on Lentimas Town and Humilau City. Lentimas already had some groundwork, while Humilau was nothing more than a blank grid, though still linked to the greater Unova map. Heading into mid-2011, it seems like the focus pendulum swung firmly back to Black 2 and White 2 over X and Y. Fast forward just over a month to June 1st, and BW2 had taken huge leaps. For starters, work on the Pokestar Studios map had begun, starting with an interactable game. And in general, it's almost like the devs started having fun with just adding stuff to the game, especially with multiple revisions to Pokestar, or even just adding expansive routes. You start to see the cities flesh out with detail, almost like Game Freak were flexing their knowledge and improvements within the Gen 5 engine, almost like they had more development time than they needed, which is an incredible contrast to later generations. By this point, Floccacy Town was fully textured and almost complete, with some NPCs even having full dialogue. Meanwhile, another building had this. Seriously, why are they using Kyurem as a placeholder NPC sprite? Lentimas Town was also close to finished and looking fantastic. Humilau City finally had some structure, though given it's one of the biggest cities in Unova, it makes sense that it was saved for last. Burbank City was also fully done at this point, complete with its music, though Roxy still used a placeholder sprite. Most of the gyms had their puzzles and designs complete too. Like Castelia City, the exterior of the old Striaton gym hadn't yet been updated, but the interior was now a void, ready for the redesign. And interestingly, if you had started a new game in this build, you'd now be dropped straight into Aspertia City, with a Professor intro cutscene now completely removed. Then we reach June 8, which I like to call my birthday build. By this point, the earliest version of the Aspertia City music had been added to the game. Speaking of the Aspersia City music, it actually went through multiple revisions, almost like Game Freak couldn't make up its mind for a while, and we're talking months.
The last one was like the
This was
closest to
also when
the
updated
the
Driftveil
original
City
one.
had been fully textured and finished up. On June 23rd, the sprites for Black Kyurem and
Yo.
White Kyurem were finally added to the game. Black Kyurem's sprite even had some slight differences compared to the final version. By June 28th, one of BW2's biggest features was added in, the Unova Link key system, which let you adjust the game's difficulty. At this stage, the menu looked very different. 2 days later, on June 30th, Roxy received her final sprite and animation. Humelau City exteriors were added, and later story events had been fleshed out even more. The Castelia sewers also had their layout completed. Interestingly, PokeStar Studios and the Complex Dungeon ended up being the very last of the new maps to be fully implemented,
Ew.
both of which were never linked to the greater Unova map. By July 16, I spot Hugh's sprite for the first time. Strangely enough, he was all the way up in Humelau City. PokeStar Studios itself still didn't exist as a proper map at this point, and it wouldn't be until August that we'd see the creation of a map. Keep in mind, Pokewood was not a scrapped name, it's just the Japanese name for PokeStar Studios. As highlighted by MD Travis, the best part about the map at this stage is that the surfing bug towards the east existed ever since the map was first added. In general, PokeStar Studios became a focus over the summer months.
That's funny.
As you're seeing right now, I think it's clear that they really cared about this mode, and the fact it took so long to even add the PokeStar Studios map, how much went into creating the mode, and just how much content the mode offered.
It
Just go
sucks because I hate this damn part of the game. I hate this shit so much. Like, you can go back all the way to like 2011 or 2012, 2013. You can ask any of my friends from back then too. Like, I hated this part. I hated PokeStars with a passion. I don't know what it is. I just thought it was the most filler dog shit ever. This is one of the worst like Pokemon side content things I think I know I'm being dramatic. I know there's probably like 3 other things I'm like can't think of at like right now, but like I hated this game mode with a passion. I do.
to show how they viewed it as
I think I still
BW2's
do.
cherry on top, similar to how the animated sprites were for BW1.
I think I still
and
hate
I think
this
it's a
damn
shame the
mode.
mode is not talked about more, because the sheer amount of polish and creativity that went into it is wild. Even I didn't realize how deep it went until research.
But it's so annoying because like this could have just been in the game. Like look at this moving background, this skyscraper. Like see, this could have just been in the game. But no, we get it on a fucking dick. I'm sorry, my fault. I'm so sorry,
this
y'all.
timeline. By the end of August, the bottom screen UI was finalized, and Humelau Gym was
See,
complete,
that's what makes me
fully
mad,
modeled
bro.
and textured inside and out. Though the actual gym battle still wasn't implemented, but this basically marked the end of work on gym interiors. Moving into September on the 10th, Aspertia City's lookout finally received its signature camera lift, potentially a remnant of an idea they had earlier in development, and they used clever lighting tricks to give the background more depth. By September 23rd, the Professor's cutscene had been re-implemented and tweaked to match BW2's style. The updated character art was finally added as well. It feels like Game Freak weren't sure where to take the intro for the longest time, which I kinda get cause it's the same professor. Around the same time, PokeStar Studios was finally linked to the Unova map, now playable in story mode and looking almost identical to its final design. Game Freak also began touching up the post-game, including work on End's updated castle, while a number of leftover BW1 locations were updated to match the BW2 design. And by October 2011, after months of iteration, the World Tournament mode was complete. In the lead up to this moment, Game Freak had experimented with shorter cutscenes, but from this point onward, the only real changes were adding in the proper tournaments with the finalized trainer rosters. October also saw the addition of early battle introductions for sequel exclusive characters, and by October 22nd, the long-awaited moment finally came. Hugh's sprite was finally implemented into the story. Absolutely huge. Elite Four content had also been finalized by this time. Just a few days later on October 25th, the starter choice cutscene was added. On November 21st, they began work on the 3D cutscenes, at first using placeholder images, but the very next day we got our first real visuals of these scenes.
Yo, this is like prime. This is prime as hell, bruh.
And by November 28th, all 3 of the major sequences had been added. By November 30th, the events for Humalao City were wrapped up, officially marking the completion of a final city in Unova. With that milestone, every major location on the map was finally complete. Moving into December, the finishing touches began. By December 13th, the opening cutscene for the game had been implemented, along with a polished version of the starter cutscene. I don't think it's ever been noted, but I'm 99% sure that this cutscene was influenced from X and Y style, considering that was also deep into development at the same time. By Christmas Day, most of the wild encounter rates and final habitat data had been implemented, and just 1 day later, the final title screen branding was added to the game. By the end of 2011, the core game of Black 2 and White 2 was practically complete. Rolling into the new year, Game Freak shifted focus to fine-tuning and finalizing details for the game. By January 11, the developers were still largely relying on the Black and White 1 soundtrack, but just a day later, the bulk of a new BW2 soundtrack was finally added in. On January 18, we got a first look at the earliest iteration of a Black 2 and White 2 title opening.
Oh, y'all, okay.
Surprisingly late in development, considering how central it was to the game. Around the same time, the legendary event scenes were also completed, and just 2 days later, the new Vermitown cutscene featuring the BW1 mother was finally implemented. Before this, there had been no special scene at all, making this one of the last, if not the last, narrative touch added to the game. Then on February 16, the final version of the title sequence was completed. And on February 18, the Professor's introduction cutscene finally received its final design. The end of the month saw the last changes made to the game's 3D cutscenes, effectively wrapping up that side of development. And by March 8, 2012, development on Black 2 and White 2 was officially complete, just 3 months before the game would release. This graph provided by MD Travis illustrates the full development cycle of BW2, showcasing the number of commits or changes made each month. While compared to the hectic pace of BW1, the sequel's development was a lot more chill, yet it's still incredible they were able to make such an ambitious follow-up while simultaneously laying the groundwork for Pokemon's jump to the 3DS.
Bro, but like that's the crazy thing about it, right? They were working on this game in a short amount of time while doing X and Y. Like X and Y is such a big game for this series, bro. Like earlier he said it was arguably one of the most like something changing things for the franchise. It is. I think it is. I think X and Y is the turning point for this series. And I can't wait to see, like, hopefully there's a Pokemon Black and White 2 remade video around Legends ZA or like before Legends ZA. We can react to that, but this is phenomenal.
Later, regardless of how BW2 performed commercially, the games definitely stand out as some of the most creatively daring entries in the series. True sequels that were truly a passion project for Game Freak. And exploring this timeline only deepened my appreciation for just how much love went into these games. And I hope it did the same for you. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to
I'm so sorry, Turtle Bro. I gotta talk to you, the older Pokemon fans. Y'all ruin everything. All of you all ruin everything, bro. These games, if I remember correctly, Black and White 2 and Black and White 1 were like the lowest selling commercial games. Y'all ruin everything. Like, you all ruin everything, bro. There should be no reason why these games, like, you can tell there's a lot of love in these games specifically, like these ones specifically. And it's like, y'all just let it flop. Like, it's just what good? I want to strangle you. What good are y'all? Y'all 35. Y'all are 30 plus years old talking about the good old days in Pokemon now. When y'all back then didn't even like it. But you know what though? It's okay. It's okay because we are paying for y'all now. You know what I'm saying? We paying for y'all not supporting these games, bruh. Now we got Legends ZA. Thank you. You know? Thank you. Anyway, that's going to be it for this. Hope you guys enjoyed. This is a very long video. I got to edit this down. I am going to go to sleep. I'll talk to you on the next one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye. I love you guys.